what your choices have been, and what karmic timelines and contracts you have journeyed. The light is calling for the reunification of all aspects of life in this realm now. It is calling for the cleansing of all polarities. It is calling for the rising of all sacred heart centers now. All are being summoned home to the greater light now. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Whole Soul School and Foundations and Whole Soul Masteries joint podcast series today. I'm here with Louise Klein, a good friend of mine, and we are going to be talking about energy and Feng Shui and how that can positively impact you in your life today as we all surf these energies of 2024. So, Louise, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Marie. This has been a long time coming. We've been talking about this for a very long time. Now we're actually doing it.
Seeds planted before, and
Yes.
Here we are. I think some of the first flowers may be blooming, and some people may resonate with that in their life. A lot of people may have planted seeds for years or decades even, and some of us are coming into a time of taking action now. We're ready. So with all the changes going on in the world, I really think this is a timely conversation to be having with you. And I wanted to start by asking you a little bit. You've journeyed in the world of Feng Shui. You've studied for many years. You've been helping and coaching people and touching lives. When did this all begin with you? What was,
way back when, before I even knew it as a child, I was drawn to little mud piles in the backyard. You know, when you have rain, there would be these little holes in the ground and the tadpoles and nature. But beyond that, we had a detached garage. And at the bottom of the garage was this really dark, kind of cave-like area, dirt floor. I was really attracted to that. And my mother always telling me, don't go down there, right? And I would go in there and I would just commune with nature. You know, like I'm putting myself there right now.
wow.
And I'm thinking, like, what was it? And I'm getting chills, actually. I see little shelves, and my father had built me little shelves, and I had, like, tea parties. And I would have tea parties with these unseen little beings. You know, I was an only child. I had cousins around, but did not have a lot of family. And so I just spent a lot of time being me with these unseen beings. So I think if I look back and I feel back to that, it began then. And then we had a summer cottage about an hour from our city home, and I would just spend hours in the woods, like hours and hours. And I, you know, trying to find lady slippers, and I knew that you weren't to touch those. You know, I would just spend days looking for lady slippers and digging worms, and I would go to bed at night and I would see these 3D images when my eyes were closed before I fell asleep of worms in the ground, and I loved holding the worms, so it was very tactile and earthy.
Yeah.
And so that was my very first experience without even knowing, you know, how connected I was to the earth at the time. This was just what I did.
Right.
So,
wow.
yeah.
Isn't that beautiful? That I think that is in many of us. You know, we are connected until we disconnect. It's a learned phenomenon to separate from all that you just described. And while you talk about how you didn't have siblings, but like nature was your playground.
Oh, yeah.
The nature and energy was your playmate.
Yeah, I could get lost for hours in the woods.
Wow.
And I still, when I close my eyes today, just talking to you about this, I have a memory of those worms, those earthworms. And I love earthworms, by the way. I could just take them in my hand. I'm surprised I didn't eat them as a kid, but I wasn't drawn to that. So, yeah, just earthy.
Yes, earthy.
Yeah, earthy.
And there was some, you didn't know it then. You felt it as a kid and you didn't filter it. But there's life force.
Yes.
You know, there's life force. So what a great start to have awareness in your life as a kid. I have some of my own memories of kind of being 5, 6, 7 and playing in nature when kids could do that a little more freely. And the world, we could say, was maybe a little bit safer then. But we could enter those realms and play in that energy. And it was as natural as anything in the world.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It was my go-to place. It made me happy.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So fast forward a little bit, Louise. And so now you're probably a young adult, but what was your greatest spiritual awakening? When did things really open up for you? Did you close down the magic of your childhood, or would you say you carried it all the way through? But at some point, you must have gone seeking more.
I did. I became a nurse because my parents wanted me to become a nurse. It served me well. It was a good profession. It was a helping profession. But I was in a long marriage that just wasn't working for either one of us. And my father died in 1987. And when he died in 1987, it was like my world was rocked, because at that point, I felt like he was the only one who loved me. He was the only one who got me. And I was standing alone in a sea of, I just don't know.
Wow.
So I was very shaken by that. It was out of body. I remember that was my first experience of being out of body, like numb. And I remember we were friends with the undertaker. And he said to me, Louise, would you like to spend a few moments with your father before we close the casket? And I'm like, sure, whatever, you know. And I went alone, and I remember hugging Dad. And this rush of energy came through like I've never experienced before, right into my heart, my solar plexus. I felt like my hair blew back. And I heard the words, Louise, I'm not dead. I'm in the trees. I'm in the forest. I walk with you forever. And I had this peace that came through. It was like the peace that passeth understanding. It was like, oh my God. But then it led me to, it led me on a journey of self-love and awakening and learning that anything, I had to learn to love myself. I then left that marriage. But in soon after that, let's back up a little bit. I started getting really interested in life after death. Where did he go?
Right.
And then I did some hospice nursing, home care hospice nursing, which was so satisfying to me, because I was learning, where did he go? Where is his soul? Where is he? I knew he wasn't at the cemetery. Everybody would go to the cemetery. I'm like, no. So
He told you he was in the wind and the trees,
exactly,
right?
And everybody's going to the cemetery. Well, he's not there. I'm not going, right? So that led me to really do this deep exploration. And as I started to realize, I read things like, Life After Life, Raymond Moody, way back when. And then I started to dig into this, and I was able to help my patients as well. So that became the most fulfilling of my nursing career right then. But then I started really doing some really deep inner work on myself. And fast forward many years later, after that relationship ended, and I met my husband Matthew, who just opened me up to everything I had been reading. He was like the person, it was like, oh my God, these are only things I read in books. He was a Zen master. He had been meditative for like 25 years. These are the things that I only read in books. And he was telling me these things. And the more I got into that philosophy, what I started to notice was that as I was shifting, my home would have to shift.
Wow.
And I noticed a direct correlation, as I do today. Today, it's a little different. Now I shift my home unintentionally, just out of pure spirit, because Feng Shui is now in my DNA. And then I step back and I'm like, oh, that happened. I know I did that because that was about to happen. So it's a different way of doing it. So then I started, a friend had mentioned Feng Shui. I had never heard of Feng Shui. And a friend mentioned it to me, and it fascinated me. And it was just a passing, Feng Shui. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So we went to the bookstore. I remember this particular Sunday morning. I said to Matthew, we have to go to the bookstore. We have to go to Barnes and Nobles. I have to stay there for 2 hours, and I don't know why. So we were there, and I was in the interior design section because along with Feng Shui, I've always been into interior design. There's part of me that I say I missed my calling when I didn't go to the Rhode Island School of Design, but I think that's innate for me as well, and I didn't have to do that. So I was in the interior design section, and I remember there was nothing on Feng Shui at the time. There were hardly any books. And I remember Matthew getting a little impatient. All right, we've been here 2 hours now. Can we go? I'm like, just give me one more second. And I still feel that moment because I ran back. I can still see the store. I can still see the books on the bottom shelf. And the Western Guide to Feng Shui by Tara Catherine Collins fell on my foot. I was like, whoa.
Talk about the universe getting your attention, right?
Really. And I still remember looking at this book and thinking, oh yeah, that's what my friend had mentioned. Well, and I remember the thought well, $12.95, right? I've wasted more money than that. I'll just bring it home because he's in a hurry. And got home, started reading the book, stayed up all night and read this book. And finally, I realized what I had been doing my entire life was in that book. It was like the biggest aha moment of my life, aside from, that energy from Dad and others.
Wow.
But yeah, so 6 months, no. So the following day, I noticed the back of the book said the Western School of Feng Shui was in India, not in Indiana, that's another school I went to, in San Diego. And so I called, and 6 months later, I was flying to San Diego to study this subject that had already been in my DNA, but I didn't know what it was.
Right.
So
how many people can relate to your story? Number one is that you found your way into nursing, right, as a career path, and you were serving and you were helping people. You were activated in the experience of your father's passing, but him communicating through you in that moment that, there's life after death, right? That there is really no death, that he's still everywhere all the time and that he's with you forever. Yes. But the journeys people go through where you have your day job, which you were serving, and you were finding meaning, and you were in the hospice work, I think that you said you were doing. Yeah.
That's where I found the most meaning.
The most meaning.
Yeah.
And then having this experience that activates something in you, like the wonder that you had as a child in nature, right? With the earthworms, in the forests. I don't know, when I was listening to you share that part of your story, the book falling off the bookshelf, but something connecting with the part of you that has always known this, the design, how what you have in your environment affects your experiences, or what you have in your experiences is affecting your environments. And you started to see how those things were connecting. Again, it felt as natural as anything in the world to you.
Yeah. And I didn't even know the principles at that point. It's funny because, I have studied and practiced and coached for 25 years now. And, I've learned every cure there was to learn. I studied at Harvard Divinity School with Professor Thomas Lin Yun, who brought Feng Shui to the United States in 1987, coincidentally, the year my father died as well.
Right.
And so, I studied there with him. I went on to get several certifications all across the country, but I really dove into it. As I do today. you
Yes.
know? And then I started to notice that my clients, they were doing the outside work, but there needed to be another component, like bringing the inside with the outside. And so I had also studied with Denise Lin, and I was in Connecticut. My husband and I were actually at one of her weekends, and she announced that she was not going to be doing Feng Shui anymore, but she was going to be doing something called soul coaching. And I remember, talk about another energy. I remember it was like somebody pulled my arm up, and I'm like, oh my God, my arm is up. And then I looked over at Matthew, and that was another experience of energy that I'll never forget. His whole being, like, he melted. He was like a puddle on the floor. It's like, here she goes again. Right? Because he knew that when I studied and practiced and did this,
Yes.
it shifted our life. It also cost me a nominal leg to do all of
Which
this.
is the puddle.
That was his puddle, right? And so I just knew I had to do it. And I'm like, can we sign up? And Denise is like, well, I haven't finished the book yet, but you could help me. And then 13 of us, I believe it was 13 of us, 6 months later,
Wow.
we're flying to California to study soul coaching. So that was a very profound experience. So when I came home, I knew I needed to do something with both. So I developed this 5-week program, blending the Feng Shui and the soul coaching. It was my little program. I would go to people's homes. We would initially do a clearing. I would tell them, what to expect during the soul coaching. It was a 5-week program based on the elements of nature, and take notes of what needed shifting in their lives based on their intention and based on what they needed to release. And so I would take these notes and visit them every week. I did things like Reiki and everything in my toolbox. I'd give them Reiki sessions. We would talk. And then as stuff came up, like, 'cause stuff comes up when you work with the elements, and it was daily affirmations as things came up. Let's say something came up in their relationship, because when we're putting light into a space,
Yes.
everything unlike it, like what's happening on planet Earth
Yes.
right now, everything unlike it came up. So I talked to them about clutter clearing, and they would do a lot of clutter clearing. It was part of the program as well. We would then implement a Feng Shui cure in that area associated with their life, what was coming up as a result of doing the inner work. And it was really powerful. It was crazy. I had a lot of clients, and it was just kind of a magical time.
You probably have so many stories.
Well, I have tons of endorsements. Talk about clutter clearing. I am the master at clutter clearing. I decided my 25-year-old website wasn't working, and I don't know, it took it down, and we didn't save any of the endorsements, and I'm like, oh my God. But whatever, that's the past,
Right.
But I had some really pretty good endorsements about this program, which was pretty magical.
Wow. Well, I know
Yeah.
it's something that I've learned from you. This is in every fiber of your being. Talk about you. I mean, I can feel
I just
you
got
now.
a chill when you said that.
Right? As
Yeah.
a kid in the forest and loving that and being one with that. I feel like when you discovered this, you also, it awakened maybe that inner child, the part of you that had never gone anywhere, but she came more fully online when you were seeing it in your own life. I know you've been a messenger of clutter clearing to me, and I still need work in those areas.
We all do, I have this bunch of pictures, family pictures. I know it's the last to go. I am ruthless with everything else, but these pictures, I've just been carrying the bin around for
Yes.
like 20 years now. It's like,
Right? And how many of us have that whether it's
That's,
a
to
bundle
me,
of
the
pictures
hardest
or, I have stuff, I'm kind of like the messy artist, it's probably an archetype, I have many projects that I have going on simultaneously, and I'm somebody who like, oh, I could use that for that, or I could use that for that. So I'm one of those people, Louise.
But I don't see that as clutter. I will tell people that's creative chaos.
I like that, Louise.
Yeah,
Creative
it
chaos.
takes the pressure off, doesn't it?
I just breathe a little better, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we create, it's messy, right?
Yes.
And you have everything you need, and you're just like stirring the pot.
Right.
So-
but there's a balance. There has
There
to be
is.
a balance. And I don't always strike that balance as a creative chaos kind of person. But something that came to me years ago was that unwanted things were clutter. Unappreciated things were clutter. But appreciated things in your home are resources.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And people don't always take the time to be as conscious as what we're talking about, because this was in every fiber of your being. But in some people, it may not be in every fiber of their being,
Right.
but we all need like this awareness as we step into being more conscious creators, because until we have our own awakenings, like you had your awakening, until we have those kinds of awakenings, we are unconscious creators, which means we're creating a mixture of good and bad in our life. But when we become deliberate creators, right? When we become conscious creators, you may start to notice, which I have in my house, I know that there's some clutter amidst some other wonderful resources. And go
Let
ahead.
me add to that.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we all practice Feng Shui. Every one of us. It's an intuitive art. Okay? So I can go in a home and, given permission, I don't look where I'm not asked to go, but given permission, I can look at a home and I can tell, like a house whisperer, what areas may be working, what areas are not, what areas you want to address, that you want to even talk about, and then I open up the conversation. So in other words, we intuitively place things where we are in our life. So if I get a call from a woman and she feels lonely and alone and she wants a relationship, that's what she's feeling inside. So intuitively, if I take a peek in the relationship area, I'll see that she has pictures of forlorn single boats or single women or any of that, because that's what she's feeling. So when she wants to change that, we change the focus. So we'll take those single objects out, we'll add things in pairs, pictures of loving couples, because it's an intuitive thing. We change it, and so our environment changes, and it's a subliminal message. It's intentional design.
Right.
And the end result is that, after all these years of study, it's so funny. I've gone through so many gambits of it's good, but I don't believe it anymore. All these cures that I learned. And then I started getting pictures. I would be with a client and nothing I had ever learned, ever as a cure, a so-called Feng Shui rule cure, worked anymore, because I would spontaneously get pictures of my own cures and I would tell them and they would work.
Wow.
So yeah, it's deep and it's complex, and yet it all boils down to, in the end, after I did all of that, oh, this is baloney, whatever, it came down to, that was it. It all, 30 years later or 25 years later, it boiled down to how it feels. However, I had to learn the rules, throw them away to get to that. Okay, they're thrown away. They're in my DNA. They're in my toolbox.
It's a part of you, right?
And now I can create just out of, how does that feel? And it's as easy as that for me. And it can be as easy as that for someone else too.
Yeah.
How does it feel? And that's what I would say to my clients. Let's hold this there. How does it feel? And it may break all the rules.
Right.
But if it feels good,
Right.
like the forlorn woman there.
And you have the foundations, though, of understanding all the aspects of Feng Shui and how that weaves the expression of us in our lives, when you have that foundation, you have the freedom to go off grid with it, to
Totally.
listen intuitively now. That's a kind of mastery. What we're talking about is a mastery, which to me in your story, Louise, I hear it was there the whole time. It was there when you were playing. It was there when you expanded and you had to get all the training and you wanted to spend the time with it the way that you did. It was like mirroring what you already knew, but sometimes we go back to school to know what we already know.
It was like an ancient language.
It was like an ancient language for you.
that
Yeah.
I knew, but I was relearning.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
a lot of us can relate to that, right? In many areas of our life, but I also love how you make it so accessible, because in my life, whatever that creative, intuitive artist energy that I have, organization is not my forte. And maybe I associate organization with Feng Shui, and maybe they don't necessarily have to, I don't know if they go together, but the clutter, the space clearing goes together somehow.
So I believe that we are the light, okay? Actually, the Western School of Feng Shui, one of the things that they said, and it was way back when, 1998, I believe, it's like, you are the blessing. It was like, whoa. And then when I studied with Professor Lin, I can still to this day see his blackboard, and he would always start with like 1 through 9, you know, whatever that was, I forget. But I remember number 9. I always looked at number 9 as he was talking and still listening. Number 9 was the other. And I'm like, what is that other? Well, I learned through the years what that other was. And it's, you know, in your case, I think we're all here on the planet right now to give up those old beliefs.
Yes.
So if you keep thinking you're not organized, you're, you know, all of that, well, guess what? Maybe you are in the way that Marie's organized, and it works for you. It might not
does.
work.
I have to
Well,
say
then
it does.
Then stop giving yourself a hard time.
Right.
But there are things that we can do.
Yes.
I should say, however.
Yes.
There are things we can do. We all have like outdated whatever, pills, medicine bottles,
Yes.
creams, toothbrushes, whatever.
True clutter. Well, if
Yes.
it's not a resource, if it's not appreciated,
Correct.
it can be clutter. And then that also is creating our lives, right? It's impacting what we are manifesting, what we're drawing in.
Yep. Everything is alive, everything is connected, and everything is always changing. So when you look at your home, in that regard, whatever fills that space, nature abhors a vacuum. So if you have, let's say, this old dilapidated couch and you're dying to replace it, I say get rid of it. Live without it.
Live without it for a while.
Because nature can only fill that gap when
Wow.
it's empty and removed, if that makes
Wow,
sense.
it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense. Well, I know as a witness to the way that you live, and right now while we're in this podcast, I'm visiting you. So we're here in person together. And I get to experience Louise's amazing home. And I know you're always tuned in to energy that needs to shift. It's kind of the chicken or the egg situation where, you know,
both.
are you changing things in your house because you have an anticipated change that's coming up?
Yeah.
Or is there a change that's coming that's calling you to change something in your house?
Yep.
Right? But because it's so integrated in you, it's the same mirror. It's somehow in the oneness. It's so aligned, and you can feel that. Spaces, when you go into spaces that have this kind of clarity, it's gorgeous. I think people want to be in this experience, and I think one of the things that you do is that you make this accessible. It's like you say, like Feng Shui is intuitive for all of us. We just don't know it. And it helps me as somebody who I think in my old language about myself would think about myself as kind of disorganized, but everything that I do is purposeful. Everything that I have in my life, maybe not everything, but a lot of things in my life and in my home have meaning for me, and they spark inspiration. And there's a way when you work with somebody like you, Louise, to bring into awareness and to reframe even that,
Yeah.
then maybe what I have in my home that I love so much, maybe a lot of it is actually good.
I'm sure it is.
And then
But
there are
you're
still things,
labeling it,
right? My labeling
right?
it.
And then you're feeling guilty and you're thinking, well, I should do this. They're different people. For me, clutter is just not my thing. I get rid of things way before and then
Right.
I'll need them. But that's a whole other story.
Right.
But I'm more comfortable that way. That
Right.
might not, I think I have a lot of metal in my chart too.
Yes.
So that might not work for everyone. You might feel if you lived here, it's like, oh my goodness, where's the food?
Where are the resources?
Where are the resources in case I'm like, oh, whatever, I'll survive, I'll go back in the woods, what have you.
Right.
So we're all different. And if that works for you, that's wonderful. And I also want to add, Marie, I believe on an ending note,
Yes.
is when I went through that phase of, I don't think I want to do Feng Shui anymore. I'm not sure if I even want to, 10 years of doing the Feng Shui and the soul coaching, it was deep, it was work.
Yeah.
But it was satisfying. But I just got to this phase when Matthew and I moved to the mountains or even to Winston, I think. And the South was not as open as, the clients I had in Connecticut.
Of course.
And so it was Feng Wat, and I was like, I just want to play. I just want to play. So I knew I needed a camera. And so in my play days, it was like, I know I need a camera, and I'm not techie at all. So I knew it had to be my big girl camera. I got a DSL, I forget what it was. I still have a Nikon. And I started taking these pictures, and it just brought me so much joy. It was my meditation. I had a macro lens, and then I started a Facebook site. I think I had 2,000 or 3,000 people on the Facebook site. I called it the Etheric Eye Narrative Nature Photography. I would post little quotes of nature and all these images that I still have, like about 1,000 of them. And people would ask me, what settings are you using? I'm like, I don't know. I know it's not on automatic, but I'm intuitively just playing with the dials. And I captured things like spirits and, things that... Orbs and all of those things. And that was fun. And people would ask me to buy these photographs. And I'm like, I just don't want to sell them.
Right.
I just wanted to give. So that was one phase. And then when we finally did move to the mountain home, I took this doll workshop. I actually did encaustics along the way too, where I was working with beeswax, again from nature, and oil and a blowtorch, with my fiery nature. I loved working with this blowtorch. I did that for a while, and it was like, okay, what's next? Well, I took a doll workshop with Cher Schaefer, and I was like lit up. OMG. I could take everything that I know and what I've learned and put it into these little dolls. And so I started giving workshops. And I had a lot of workshops. I had a lot of people. I started making dolls. This is going to sound a little bizarre, but the first 3 dolls I made, actually, I hung on the wall and I thought they were mine. And I walked by them one morning, waking up, I had coffee in hand, and I heard, woo, these dolls talk. It's like, we want to go. I'm like, go where? Put me on Facebook. I put them on Facebook. Under 10 minutes, this woman contacted me and wanted these 3 dolls.
Wow. All 3, Louise. All three.
All 3. And I heard a price and was like, no way. And they're like, yeah, way. There was no questions asked. And from that moment on, I started creating. I had my little she shed. I started creating. Amazing stories happened, which I won't get into, but they were pretty crazy. And then I thought, okay, I'm taking this to the workshop level. I can take everything I've learned, intention, placing intention, release, release ceremonies, shamanism.
Yes.
Coming together, with women of like mind, holding space, intentionally creating these dolls so that when they brought them into their home, they could be reminded of that intention. That went really well. I was in my joy.
Beautiful.
I sold dolls. I would sell about 2 or 3 a week. It was just crazy all over the United States. One went to Australia, I believe, and Canada.
Wow.
It was just crazy. And then I started
Wow.
Zoom workshops, and friends of mine started doing the same.
Yes. You taught people how to do this, right?
They
You shared it.
kind of knew. I shared it.
Right.
Yeah, they were doing things that were similar. So,
Right.
But it was great to share. And so that went real well. And I remember it just got shut off, like completely shut off. I couldn't make a doll anymore after 3 years of
Wow.
being really successful in this and bringing women together. And it was just awesome. I couldn't make the doll. It just wouldn't
As
flow.
quickly as it came, it seemed
As
to close
it-
out.
Yeah, it was like a faucet shut off. And I remember saying to Matthew, I just can't do it. It's not coming through. And I would force it. And being astute as he was, he said, it's an energy. You can't force it. Give it up. Well, a few weeks later is when he got sick with COVID and subsequently died. But I saw then that my energy just wouldn't be aligned to doing that anymore. So I stopped. It shifted. And then the journey went on, which will probably be another
podcast, right?
But it led me here to Wilmington, and I love this home. And
Yes.
now I'm going to be doing individual one-on-one workshops here in my home, like a 3-day intensive.
Wow.
Where we can either make the dolls, we can work on letting go of old beliefs, just reworking. We're going to bring in some Feng Shui. I will do long distance clearing of these people's homes. I will give them cures to do when they go home after we've done these release ceremonies, build altars. I'm going to have fresh organic food, and you're just going to have a one-on-one. It'll be designed exactly for you.
Wow.
And I'm going to start doing this in my sacred space. Just prior to Matt's passing, we in my little studio, we're going to turn that into an Airbnb, and it didn't happen. And so now I think all of this has come full circle to do this. And so I'm going to put it out there. I have no attachment to it whatsoever. I feel like people just come in this house anyway. And
Yes.
and as you know,
They are cleared. When I'm here, the clarity that comes just being in the experience, being with you, Louise, it is a part of you. So just communicating with you, connecting with you, coming to some of your workshops, entering into the coaching with you, it invites this magical world that has completely woven into your life, into other people's lives. And in this time where there's so much that's changing, what I love about what you offer, some work is hard. Mm-hmm. And it's probably not to say that the work you do doesn't bring up some stuff that is being flushed to the surface. We all are going through it, right? Now more than ever. But this gives you a space. It can be playful, it can be joyful, it can be gentle,
Safe.
right? It can be safe. Where
Nurturing.
not all modalities can feel this good as you're going through it and create the positive and impactful change. The way Feng Shui and this whole soul awareness, this soul coaching, the way it brings about change can be really beautiful.
yeah, how many of us have gone away to these healing retreats and have come home to the same old house? You're trying to,
Right?
somebody's trying to quit smoking and they're staring at the chair they sat on. And I am hopefully going to give tools so that when you come home, if you apply the principles and keep working with it and change your home,
Right?
and clear your home, I'll do a long distance clearing, then you can create long-lasting
Change.
Yeah.
Long-lasting change.
Yeah.
And some people, like we're acknowledging today, there's a lot of different ways that people can do this.
Absolutely.
But this is a beautiful way where you were talking about this a little earlier, what's bringing things from the outside in or the inside out. It is this mirroring. What you have inside you is mirrored to you in your home. And when you can consciously and deliberately make changes then things in the areas of your life that you might be seeking changes in, those are the stories that you have. Those are the things that if you hadn't experienced it, maybe you wouldn't believe it. But when you begin to have the experiences that this kind of changing, this awareness and changing things in your home and bringing new energies into your home, colors, whatever it might be, it is extraordinary. And I have been a witness to so many of your stories, and I would be remiss if I didn't say two more things as we round out this podcast. Number one, you especially, but both you and Matthew, you were the two most influential catalysts and igniters of my children's path. When you got that camera, truly, when you got that camera and you were playing around with it and engaging your etheric eye and bringing that into the world and playing in nature the way you were, we were homeschooling our kids at that time. And they met you and they saw you up close and personal with some flowers. They wanted to do it too.
And look at your boys today. And Caroline, oh my God.
Two filmmakers and photographer. And my daughter is a portrait photographer.
Yeah.
It does all of these things. They do nature photography. You activated all because of your enthusiasm, because you listened and you got this camera, and then you loaned them your camera and they emulated you. They did the same thing you were doing, and they got up close and personal with nature, and then it ignited their path. And so all these ways, we have no idea how it's going to touch lives, but it does. That spark of creation, you had it as a kid. You ignited that in my children. Their career paths are absolutely following a very similar trajectory in this way of creating. And the beauty of what you did, where you also have this energy of try it, right? Nothing's forever. And what I watch you again and again, if you try something, you shift something in your house and it doesn't feel aligned, you change it again and you change it again.
Because we're always changing.
We're always changing.
So our environments need to continue to change to support us. If I could leave with one thing.
Yes, please.
One word of inspiration.
Please.
All of this work is about awareness. It's all about becoming aware and paying attention. I believe the next year is all going to be about how to interpret these signs. Yes, we can be aware and we could, make stories out of the awareness, but to become really clear in what that awareness is saying to us.
Right.
And how we are filtering it, sort of like what we talked about this morning, you and I.
Yes.
Which is a whole other podcast.
Right. There's many seeds that I think we're planting today, but that people, whether they know it or not, are seeking this clearing. But when you are more clear, there's a lot of things that are healing and coming together so that you're more accessible for what it is that you're meant to be doing, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a new mission or a project, all of these things. But you're right, it does start with awareness. And so we both have many things that we're seeding in here today. If we were to take that one step further as we close this out, what do they do with this when they're aware of the importance of awareness and they hear a conversation like we're talking about today, and we've just seed planted in their consciousness the potential of how this could positively impact their lives? They could actually create some change and some movement in their lives where there's stagnancy or confusion or whatever it might be. What do people do? Where do they begin?
I think beginning with clutter clearing, looking at the stuff in your home, without the energy that you put around it.
The judgment.
Right?
Without judgment, with neutrality, just
judgment.
observing.
How does this feel? Does it serve who I am today? Am I holding on to it because Aunt Nellie gave it to me and I feel guilty? All of those things. So to begin to look in your home and do clutter clearing, it doesn't have to be a lot. It can be a little every day. And then along with that, looking at our beliefs, kind of like your belief around so-called clutter, which could be creative chaos.
Right.
We can change our beliefs.
Right.
Or the label that we give our beliefs.
Yes.
And looking at that and letting go of those old beliefs. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm too heavy, or
Right.
All those things. Well, yeah, no, that's not who we are.
Right.
So doing both the external clutter clearing and the internal clutter clearing
Right.
of letting go of these old beliefs, bringing in the new, doing simple things like saging. If you like sage, begin at the front door, end at the front door, make sounds, just open windows, just ask that the energy's clear. And that
Wow.
will help you. That will help you to
Wow.
begin to feel lighter so that you can intentionally release those beliefs and the clutter in your home. So that's a good place to start.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, that is so beautiful. And I always marvel at how what we see in our physical lives, like the physical things that we have a deep emotional or soulful connection with us, right? And I find, like, even in my house, I'm gonna go back to my house today. I feel like when you connect with the things, even if you do have a lot of things, including crystals.
You're multifaceted.
Multifaceted. I am multifaceted,
There you
right?
go.
But I appreciate them. Just, I would look at them differently. Even if the same things, and I don't move a thing yet, I feel like even just looking at them with appreciation, just to say, I love that. It fills me with this feeling. And that can be just, at least for me, is another step of awareness to just being aware of what is in my home, right?
Yeah, the ultimate goal, I think, that we all seek is to just be okay wherever we are. We are stronger than our homes. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us, and we don't have to be.
Right.
Because, I could be in a rat-infested apartment living somewhere and think, oh, I'm blissful. Well, not so much.
Right.
But it wouldn't bother you if you had to endure that, if you did a lot of the deep personal work as well.
Yes. They go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand.
100%.
Yeah.
What's really beautiful is when you can have somebody who walks with you in the journey, who looks into the space that you have, who offers the clearing of space that you can do.
Yeah.
And also, if you can come to her beautiful space here and experience a coaching one-on-one with a few-day intensive with Louise, it's amazing how all that starts to percolate with possibility, right? And you get to integrate more of nature into your life, more of the magical into your life. I think we could all use a little bit more of the playful, the creative, the mystical coming into our life, where a lot of people are experiencing those closed doors, things closing out. The change is coming in all of our lives, and it's a lot more joyful when you turn into it and you choose it, versus, I don't know, something happens and you're made to look at something or make the change, right?
Yeah, we all
And we're
need each other
intentional.
right
We all
now.
need each other right now.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. How can they reach you, Louise, if people are interested in connecting with you?
Well, I have a Facebook site. It's called Wind and Water Design. I can do long distance consultations. It doesn't have to be local.
Okay.
Long distance clearings as well. It works just as well, although I prefer the in-house, but it would work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had a friend who used to say to me, and she still does, you come into my house, I played with that chair for 2 hours. You moved it 1/4 of an inch, she would say. She was my biggest fan, and she would say, my whole life changed. I'm like, really?
I hope people hear this, though, because that is the magic that you have. 1/4 of an inch can change your life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A quarter turn of something.
Imagine what an inch could do.
Imagine what an inch can do. We will leave our audience with that. But I truly invite people to tune in and to feel if this is something that's calling you. If you've been looking for some way to move the energy in your life, to increase community, to increase connection, to enjoy your life more in some way or some direction, or try something entirely new, there's cures and there's ways that in gentle and wonderful, and I think pretty playful ways sometimes, to make the changes. You can have a lot of fun with what this is, and you can have somebody walking it with you. So you don't have to do it alone. That's another thing. People don't have to do this alone anymore. If you find someone that resonates, Yes. And so if people are attracted to Louise's story, if you're attracted to the things we've brought forward today, please reach out to her. And I'll leave all those contact details in this video and also in the section below the video. And Louise, we have to have you back because the next thing I want to do, one of the next things anyway, is to have you tell some stories. Tell some stories. You have so many stories. We laugh and we giggle and we cry because some of these things are so beautiful. You do have some amazing stories. And the world needs to know those because I think ultimately at the end of the day where you said your teacher had 9 things on the board and you felt number 9, that's what spoke to you.
It was mystical. I didn't know what it was at the time, but it drew me in.
It drew you in.
Yeah.
And I feel like people are drawn to other people's stories, right? There are stories that can keep us trapped in the past. Those are our ego stories.
Yeah.
But there's stories that can open us up to the future that's right there. It wants to become our present.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes it's just taking the action step to go to the bookstore and have a book find you.
Yeah.
Or whether it's to reach out to someone like Louise Klein who absolutely, this is what you do. This is your specialty. You were made for this, Louise.
I do believe that.
You were made for this.
I mean, your home can become like a living vision board.
Oh,
You know, it's
so
like
gorgeous.
Who needs the cardboard,
right?
Let's just do it in the house.
Let's do it. Let's bring it to life. That's what you do. You bring it to life.
Everything has intention.
Everything has intention.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Louise. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you to our listeners who listen in and tune in to these powerful and positive messages. We're here to empower you in your journey of transformation and change. And we'll be back again another time with Louise. We'll have to come back for some stories.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Blessings.